Hello guys, it's Frank here and welcome back to the channel once again. Please, if you are new here, kindly consider subscribing to the channel, but if you are old here, thanks so much for coming back. So today I'll be walking you guys through how to design another awesome church flyer in Photoshop, and this is coming up. So here in Photoshop, to create a new document, you go to File, New, to create a new document, and I'm going to select Print and then go for A3. Alright, so I'll hit on Create to have our new document like this. Okay guys, so the next thing to do is to go for my rectangular tool and draw a very nice and beautiful rectangle here like this. Okay, and then make sure to change the color from stroke to a solid color. So I'll be using this color for the main time, and then as time goes on I'll be using a gradient color for this rectangle. All right, so what will happen here is that I have to right click on a layer and then rasterize it, and then I'll go for my polygonal lasso tool to wipe up or delete some places that I don't actually need. So I will left click here like this and then make sure to stand here again, and then I'll come back to my starting point or my destination and then make sure to hit on delete for it to be deleted. Control D to deselect what we have done already. All right, so the next thing to do is to hit on Control J to make a duplicate or copy the first rectangle drawn. All right, then use my arrow keys to drag the copied rectangle downward like this, and then make sure to change the color from the initial color to a solid color. Okay, so I'll be going for a solid color like this, so that there will be a difference between the first rectangle and then the second rectangle as well. Okay, so in this way, let's go for something green like this, and but as time goes on we'll change the color overlay. So I will have to drag the layer underneath the first rectangle drawn like this, and the Control T to add an adjustment to that. Okay, so guys, just take your time when dealing with all these stuffs like this. Okay, hit on enter, and then again use your arrow keys to drag the whole thing like this. Okay, then I'll still go back to the same layer, right click on it, and then I'll go for my blending options and then make sure to give it a gradient overlay. So I have to deactivate the color overlay, and then I go for my gradient overlay. But in this case I have already worked on the gradient overlay, so then what I'll do is give you the color codes for this rectangle or the gradient overlay here like this. Okay, all right, so the next thing to do is to go to my resources and then add a couple of images to our document. So I'll drag and drop these beautiful images I have worked on already to our document like this. Hit on OK and then Control T again to add an adjustment or a transformation on that. All right, so just move the layer on top of the document. So we'll be having something like this. Guys, I'm very sorry I have already worked on these images, but I will make sure to leave the link in the description for you guys to follow suit. So we'll be having something very beautiful like this. Control A, select everything, and then make sure the images are centered. Control D to deselect, and now use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing downward like this. All right, so the next thing to do is to add a couple of text to this. So I'll hit on T, which is actually the shortcut key for the text tool in Photoshop, and then I'll be having something like this. Control A, select everything, and then make sure to add an adjustment to that. So I'll be having this there, and then I'll hit on my move tool, drag the whole thing here. But if you have been following my tutorials very well, you know very well I want everything to be in the center of my document. So I have to set my rulers like this and then make sure to drag this there like that. Okay, Control J to make a duplicate, and then use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing here. Hit on T to activate your text tool again. Control A, select everything, and then we'll go for I like this. Okay, then I'll use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing close to each other like this. All right, Control J again to make another duplicate. Hit on T again, Control A, select everything, and then we'll go for R like this. All right, so use my arrow keys again, drag the whole thing close to each other like this, and then Control J, finally Control J to make another duplicate, and then hit on T again, Control A, select everything, then we'll go for E. So it is actually a fire program. All right, so use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing down just to fit our document like this. Okay, use my arrow keys again, drag the whole thing there like that. All right, with the help of your shift key, so you hit on shift and then hit on the first layer for our text, and then everything will be copied like this, or everything will be selected, and then Control G to group everything like this, and then Control T. Since the whole thing has been grouped, we can now choose to manipulate it and then give it a size that you wanted, or the precise size you want the whole thing to be. And then I'll use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing down like this. Okay, go back to my resources, and then I'll drag and drop this fire flame in Photoshop like this. Okay, Control T, and then make sure you add an adjustment to that. Since the program is actually a fire program, I have decided to download this fire flame just to make sure the whole thing will become more and more beautiful. All right, so right click on the layer to rasterize it, and then right click on it again. Now move to my blending options, and then I'll give it a white stroke. So I'll go for my stroke like this, and then I'll give it a white stroke like this. Okay, then I'll make sure to increase the stroke size like this, and then I'll hit on OK. All right, hit on T again to activate your text tool, and then we're going for let there. So Control A, select everything, and then change the font from capital Clickbait to a font called Aurora, one of my favorite fonts. All right, so make sure to make an adjustment to this, and then we'll be having something like this there. All right, so click on your move tool, and then make sure you bring the whole thing on top like this. Control T, still add a transformation or an adjustment to that, and then I've hit on OK. Use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing downward like this. Okay, so I'll still go for my rectangular tool, and then draw a very nice but small rectangle here like this, and then make sure to change the color from stroke to a solid color. All right, so I'll go for my move tool, use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing on top like this. Okay, Control J, make an adjustment, and then use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing downward like this. Okay, and then I'll still go back to my rectangular tool, and then draw a very nice rectangle here to like this. Okay, so just take your time when dealing with all these stuffs. Okay, so I'll draw a very nice rectangle here like this, but in this case we are not using a stroke color. Just get this in your head, guys, and then we'll go for a solid color like this. Drag the layer on top of the layers, and then drag it here like this. Okay, so Control J, make a duplicate, and then use your arrow keys to drag the whole thing to fit those small rectangles you have drawn. Okay, so go back to my notepad, and then we'll go for this there. Okay, so copy this, Control C to copy it, and then go for your text tool again, hit on any part of the document, and then Control V to make a paste from there. All right, so accept the whole thing in Photoshop. Control T, to add a transformation to that. Hit on enter, drag the whole thing here like this. So I'll still move to my notepad, and then we'll still be adding a couple of tests to this. Okay, so this is actually the venue of the program. So Control C, copy it, and then hit on T to activate your text tool, and then left click at any part of the document, and then Control V to paste that. Okay, so Control A, select everything, and then change the color from white to this foreground color, and then change the font from Aurora to a font called Poppins. Okay, so we're having this there, and then make sure to change the font size from bold to extra bold like this, and then make sure there is much spaces between the font. Okay guys, just take your time when dealing with all these stuffs. All right, so accept the whole thing in Photoshop, and then go for your move tool like this. All right, so hit on Control T to add a transformation to that. This is too big, and then make sure you take your time and then you work on this. Control T again, and then we'll still have to be adding our transformations on that until we get exactly what we wanted. Okay, so I'll put this there like this, and then make sure to use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing on top like this, and then finally Control T again to drag this there like this. Okay, I just want the whole thing to be fitted to our document. Okay, so we'll be having something like this, and then I'll still hit on T again to move the police junction to the center of the document. So I'll only be hitting on space bar until I get to the center of the document like this. Okay, and then I have to accept the whole thing in Photoshop like this. All right, so I have to go back to my resources or my notepad to add the direction of the required number you have to call when you are about attending this program. Hit on T again, and then Control V, make a paste from there. All right, Control A, select everything, and then change the color from the foreground color. Change the color from the foreground color to a reddish color like this. All right, so I'll accept the okay like this, and then I'll accept the whole thing in Photoshop like this. All right, so Control T to still add a transformation on that. Hit on enter, accept the whole thing in Photoshop, and then make sure to drag it to the center of your document. So we'll be having something very beautiful like this there. All right, so I'll stand here again, and then make sure to transform it to fit our document. Accept the whole thing in Photoshop, and then use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing on top like this. All right, so we'll be having something very, very beautiful like this. Okay, so I'll go back to my first layer and then drag it downward like this, and then I'll go back to this rectangle I have drawn, and then make a copy. Control J to make a copy, and then use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing down like this. Okay, so I'll drag this there like this, and then go for my copied rectangle like this, and then move it on top like this. Okay, and then finally I'll go for more info and direction, and then move that one to on top like this. Hit on T again, and then make sure the police call is also at the center of the document. So we'll be having something very, very beautiful like this. All right, so I'll accept the whole thing in Photoshop, and then make sure everything is on top like this. Then I'll still go back to my notepad and then copy the numbers you can contact when you want to attend the program. All right, so hit on T again, then just Control V, and then you can make a paste from there. All right, so Control T again, and then make sure the whole thing is centered. All right, or the whole thing is transformed. We'll be having something like this. Control T again, and then add a little bit of transformations and adjustments to that. All right, so I'll make sure to leave it here like this, and then Control T again, stand here, and then make sure everything is aligned to the ruler I have set, and then I'll hit on OK like this, and then use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing downward like this. Make sure to change the color from the foreground color to this color here like that. All right, accept the whole thing in Photoshop like this. This is becoming more and more beautiful. All right, so I'll still go back to my notepad and then copy the name of the church. So we're having this there. Control C, select everything, and then hit on T again. Just stand at any points of the document, and then Control V. We'll be having something like this there. Control A, select everything, and then change the color from the foreground color to a white color. But in this case, we'll be using a font called Century. So we'll be having this there like that. Okay, so this is actually one of the best fonts I have also used before for almost all my projects. All right, so make sure the whole thing is becoming more and more small. All right, so hit on enter just to get the separation between the church and then the international. So Control A, select everything, and then make sure the spaces are closed like this. Okay, so accept the whole thing in Photoshop like this, and then Control T will still add adjustment and transformations to that. All right, so hit on V to activate your move tool, and then Control A, make sure that the name of the church is centered. Control D to deselect. All right, so finally the next thing to do is to add the date and then the time for this program. So we'll be going for T again like this, and then just hit on any part of the document, and we'll be going for 20th like this. Change the font from Century to a font called Poppins. So we're having this there like that, and then make sure to change it from bold to extra bold like this. Okay, so we're having this there like that. Accept the whole thing in Photoshop. Control T to add an adjustment to that, and then make sure to take your time when doing all this kind of stuff. So we're having this there. Accept the whole thing in Photoshop, and then just bring it somewhere here like this. Okay, so we're having this there. Control J, make a duplicate, then use my arrow keys to drag the whole thing down like this. Hit on T again, and then we're having what, 22nd. So we're having 22nd here like that, and then we'll be having this there. All right, so I'll accept the whole thing in Photoshop like this. All right, so Control J to still make a duplicate or a copy. Drag the whole thing down like this. I'll still hit on T to activate my text tool, and we'll be having February there like that. Okay, we having this there, then 2023. Okay, so Control A, select everything, and then make sure to change the font size from extra bold to something medium like this. All right, so accept the whole thing in Photoshop like this, and then make sure everything is aligned to each other, and then we'll be having this there like that. Accept the whole thing in Photoshop, and then drag this here like this. All right, so the final thing or the final step to do is to draw a very nice and beautiful rectangle here like this, and then make sure everything is aligned to each other like this. And then also I'll have to change the color from stroke to a white color, so I'll be changing this to a white color like this, just because of the foreground color. That's the main reason why I am using a white color there for this rectangle. So we'll be having something like this. Okay, and then hit on T again, stand at any part of the document, and then going for 6:30 p.m. all right, so GMT. Control A, select everything, change the color from white to this foreground color, and then make sure to use my move tool, and then I'll drag it on top of the rectangle I have drawn. Ctrl T to add a transformation to the time of the program. Okay, so Ctrl T like this, and then I have to drag this there like that. Okay. Alright, so the final thing to do is to go for my ellipse tool and then draw a very nice circle there like this. Okay, so I'll go for my ellipse tool like this, and then I'll draw a very nice, just hold on shift left click and then drag to draw a very nice circle here like this, and then I will make sure to give it not a stroke color, but I'll give it a solid color. So in this case I'm going to use this yellow color for the main time. Alright, so hit on V to activate my my move tool like this. Alright, so I'll right click on a layer and then make sure to give it a stroke color. Alright, so in this case I'm going to give it a white stroke. Yeah, something beautiful like this. Okay, and then hit on T to activate my text tool again, and then I'll be having something like this. Just hit on any part of the document. So 3 days. Alright, so 3 days fasting. Alright, so Ctrl A, select everything, and then make sure to drag the whole thing to the center of the circle you have drawn, and then change the font from Poppins to a font called Aurora. Alright, so I have to select this and then make sure to accept the whole thing in Photoshop like this. Alright, so we're having 3 days fasting and prayers. Alright, so hold on. Alright, so hold on Alt, left click and drag, or better still you can hit on Ctrl J to make a duplicate. So we're having something like this. Alright, so we're having fasting and prayers. So 3 days fasting and prayers. Accept the whole thing in Photoshop, and then Ctrl T to make a little bit of transformations to that, and then hit on enter on your keyboard, and then accept the whole thing in Photoshop like this. Alright, so go for your 3 days fasting layer and then drag the whole thing to the center of the ellipse or the circle you have drawn. Something very beautiful like this is exactly what I've shown you guys on the thumbnail. Alright, so guys, I want to thank you all for having time for this particular, but the last thing to add is to go for my rounded rectangle, and then guys, I'm sorry, I just have to add this thing in. It's very beautiful. Draw a very nice rounded rectangle here like this, and then make sure to change the color from stroke to a white solid color like this. Alright, so accept the whole thing in Photoshop and then drag the whole thing here like that. Alright, so go back to my resources and then add this there. Drag and drop this beautiful share button in Photoshop like this. Okay, so add a little bit of transformations to it and then drag it on top of the rounded rectangle drawn. So we're having something beautiful like this. Use my arrow keys to make sure the whole thing is positioned very well. Alright, so this is what I have for you guys today, and I want to thank you all for having time for this particular tutorial, and may God richly bless you all. It's Frank here, and I am out.